Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS reInvent. We're going to be talking today about how to centralize control and visualization of your multi-account, multi-region environments. This is session MGT220-P. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I am Sam Hennessy, a solutions architect with AWS, specializing in management and governance tools. So let's get started. Our agenda today, we're going to first start with how most typical customers start their journey, a single account, and the various aspects and pieces that you're going to have to put in there. And then really we're going to talk about the challenges to a single account approach and some of the things you're going to come across. We'll talk about migrating a single account to multi-account, multi-region type setups. And then the new set of problems that particular setup will appear. After that, we'll actually be bringing up a new service feature inside of Systems Manager for AWS Ops Center Explorer, and how Ops Center Explorer can actually solve some of those challenges that you may be experiencing in your multi-account and multi-region environments. We'll give a demo of how Ops Center Explorer actually works, and then we'll finally talk about how the other management tools can really help fit a full picture together of multi-account, multi-environment setups and how you can manage it and control it from a centralized source. So let's go ahead and get started. So where it all begins. Really, we're going to start with our single account. And very first thing everyone should be doing is taking your root user that you used to create that account, putting an MFA on it, putting a hard-to-guess password on it, creating your first admin user inside of IAM, Identity and Access Management, and then taking your root user, locking it into a safe, and dumping it into the ocean, hopefully, so you can never, ever have to use it again, and you can keep your account secure and confidential. After we've set up our first admin user, we can start creating more users for whoever is going to be accessing things within our account. But the very next step really is setting up AWS CloudTrail. And this is in order to understand the visibility of everything going on in all regions inside of your account for a wonderful security stance. At the very least, you should have it enabled and active to be able to do forensic analysis after the fact, but you should also be looking at doing proactive analysis on the CloudTrail logs as they're coming in. Since CloudTrail actually logs, we have to place these logs somewhere, you'd need to turn on Simple Storage Service S3. We're going to be placing the logs inside the bucket there, and next we're going to turn on some control and compliance points. So guard duty for continuous maintenance and control of account access, as well, and config, AWS config. And that's to help allow you to keep your compliance standards and how you're going to maintain the governance of your account from the account level. After that, we're going to want some sort of cost cost management and governance. So we're going to be turning on AWS budgets and the cost and usage report, so we can report back up to executive management how much we're spending in our AWS account and really have a fine detail understanding of everything that's going on inside of there. Next, we can actually get to work and start creating things. So very first thing we put in is a virtual private cloud, or VPC. And maybe we want to start putting a couple applications in there. And now we're really firing off, right? We have applications inside of our VPC and all sorts of other nifty stuff. And since we have applications, we're probably going to have operating systems, or EC2 instances, virtual instances, Linux, Windows, whatever operating systems you need. So we're going to need a few more tools there. So CloudWatch in order to maintain visibility of what's going on with your applications, as well as AWS Systems Manager to help understand inventory, understand compliance standards on your operating system, enforce compliance standards, and generally manage your fleet of EC2 instances. Once we've set up those pieces, maybe our devs come to us and say, hey, we need new environments. We need a place to be able to build our things. We need a place to be able to do integration testing. We need a place to be able to do performance testing, load testing, UI testing, all these other pieces. Great. So now we have multiple VPCs with our applications running. And since we're going to be moving software from environment to environment to environment, we're probably going to want to have some sort of CI/CD tool set, continuous integration, continuous deployment, to be able to move that software for us. Finally, our new set of devs come in and say, we're not using that regular VPC that everyone else uses. We're special. We have to do it a different way. So maybe we have a new VPC for this private application, and then the same team says, "Hey, we want to run in multi regions," right? So we start launching VPCs in different regions, and now we have quite a few VPCs rolling around, quite a few applications inside of our VPCs, and of course, with different production applications running in different VPCs, we're going to need to have a communication layer. So we place in a transit gateway and site-to-site VPN back to our corporate data center. So now we have wonderful continuity across the entire system. Everything can communicate, and we're all wonderful. We're all happy in our huge enterprise here. What could go wrong? Well, there are challenges to a single account approach. We have account limits that can bring up challenges. We have governance, operational, and cost visibility challenges. We have permissioning challenges, as well as blast radius challenges. So I'm going to talk about the first two fairly quickly. Account limits. The AWS is we have several limits across multiple sets of our services, and that's in order to keep you from quickly growing beyond what the service limit is and extending beyond there without perhaps your knowledge of it. To extend most of these limits, it was just a simple support request saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to need X amount," and we can increase that. And that's a wonderful idea until we start having environments that have multiple types of systems all running inside of it that can possibly overrun each other. So far, and these limits are usually regional bound as well as account bound, right? So if you're in a single account, the limits applies to the entire account within that region. So if we've launched our 50 servers in production and then we have a dev environment right next to it in the same account, same region, and suddenly we need 300 servers in dev, or dev grows to 300 servers because we're doing some sort of performance testing or load testing or something like that. Now, when production actually needs those instances, they're not available. They're already sucked up by dev. We have to create an emergency case and do all sorts of running on the fly and all sorts of challenges, and that can be problematic when running production. And we also have a lack of visibility there. The next one, governance, operational, cost visibility. Multi-account, multi-region doesn't necessarily solve this particular problem, but in a single account, it is a problem, right? We have multiple types of applications running in the account, multiple things running in the account, multiple services, all sorts of things jumbled together, multiple security stances, and being able to partition out which pieces need to be looked at and which pieces need to be governed in different ways than others can be a big challenge in a single account, where segregating that into multiple accounts might have eased that challenge. Permissions, let's actually talk about permissions in our next slide. So here we have our slide from before. This is our full single account setup. And how do we start looking at permissioning? Well, we can start at the application layer. And generally, most customers that I've seen have 3 tiers of levels of permission. We have the read-only, we have power user, and they can take actions on the services. And then we have admins who have unrestricted access. Right? So each one of these applications are going to have 3 sets of user groups that are going to be that's going to be defining the boundaries of how these applications are going to be accessed and manipulated and controlled. All right? So each application, we're looking at 3 sets of groups. And then we start looking at our data, and we need 3 sets of groups per application, per data set, as well as all the security pieces, as well as all the governance pieces, as well as all the logging pieces. So we're starting to really grow our number of groups that we're using to manage this. And then we look at all of our internal tools that help with our maintenance, our governance, and our operational ability, and we have to parse those out. So the more tools we add, the more applications we add, more services that we add, the more sets of groups and users we're going to have to manage. And that can often become quite a significant operational and management challenge for you. Finally, we're going to be talking about blast radius. So I've got a story for you. We have our lead admin for company X, and this person is basically the admin for the entire account. They have full permissions to everything. And they're enjoying their day at the coffee shop, just checking up on emails, and suddenly they hear a commotion outside. And of course, everyone knows that all engineers are superheroes. So our engineer stands up, looks outside, dashes out, and to go render aid or assistance or whatever may be happening. Wonderful. Except we've possibly got a nefarious person who was watching what our admin was doing over his shoulder from far away. He notices that the admin ran off, and because it was a big event outside, the admin just happened to leave his laptop unlocked. And with a few simple keystrokes of a new terminal window, they have full access to the entire kingdom now, right? So they own the same set of credentials that your admin, who is managing everything in your account, has. So what could possibly go wrong from that scenario? Well, here's how I would personally start doing it. If I was a bad guy and I were to have credentials to someone else's account, I would start looking at security logs, customer data, PII, possibly destroying data, possibly encrypting it for ransom, all sorts of wonderful things I can do with the data. There's great stories here of terrible, terrible things that we can do to cripple your business, destroy your business, harm it, all sorts of evil, evil things. Next, look at IAM. So maybe I'm going to create new users in the background. Maybe I'm going to add access keys to little known or little used users. Maybe I'm going to add admin permissions all over the place, right? There's no telling what I can really do when I have full access to IAM and be able to manipulate these things. Next, I'm going to look at guard duty, right, and disable or modify to cover my tracks. I don't want guard duty notifying anyone of the nefarious deeds I'm getting to your account, right? So I'm going to turn that off, possibly just modify it so you don't notice what I'm doing. Same thing with CloudTrail. I don't want anyone to look at what I've been doing. I don't want anyone to have a forensic log or be able to backtrack or be able to turn off the stuff I've possibly turned on, right? So I'm going to disable it or modify it to cover my tracks. Same thing with config. I'm going to modify those rules. I'm going to change that behavior. I'm going to change everything that is going to be watching, again, in order to cover my tracks and not have it alert before I've taken the final actions and gotten all of your data or locked everything down and asked for a huge check from your company. With access to the CI/CD tools, we can have IP theft, intellectual property. So they have direct access to source. They may have direct access to source control, to the builds, to your intellectual property of how all of your pieces are built. And go into the budgets, start modifying, so you don't see all sorts of Bitcoin servers popping up and start their minings. Your bill is escalating hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I've kept it secret because I've turned off all the alarms, so I don't, so I can get as much of that Bitcoin money as I can. And then finally, I can hop into Systems Manager and launch executions against your entire fleet. I can create scripts that will launch against every single instance that we have in this account and mine for data, take other actions, turn off, destroy, delete things. The possibilities are really limitless. So, single account, kind of challenging, and there's some really good reasons why you may not want to look at it. So let's look at multi-account. So here we have what AWS describes as best practices for multi-account. Very first, in the upper left corner, we have AWS Organizations. That's going to be our master organizations account. That's not something where we want to launch production. That's not something where we want to launch tools. Really, that should be kept as small and purposefully built for managing the rest of your accounts and regions as possible. So really very little should be in there other than the organizations taking control of other accounts. Right under that, we have a security account and a security or logging account. So this is where all of the logs from everywhere else, from all the AWS security and governance tools, from the management tools, from the applications, CloudTrail, everything, right, should be coming into a single account. And that account should not allow anyone to actually manipulate inside that account, right? So any users in that account or any users who are taking over roles inside that account should not have access to delete items, to modify items, to write to that. No access there, read only. Right? The only things that should be writing there are services from other accounts and logging systems from other accounts and sources from other accounts that would all fill into there. The bottom layer on the left, we're looking at some sort of authorization layer. So actually, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you use some sort of single sign-on federated solution, tying back to a corporate LDAP or Active Directory, something where you have a single source of truth for all of your users. If you don't have that to be able to manage, I would suggest a authorization account, and that's where your users go. So do not create users in every one of these accounts. Create users in one place, and then assume roles into the other accounts for security purposes, right? Biggest reason there is if we have users, individual users that log into 15, 20, 30 accounts, and as an admin, I get a ticket and that says, hey, this person left in a huff. They're really upset. We should probably remove their access. And I remove it from 19 of the 20 accounts. Unfortunately, the 20th account was production. And now the person has unfettered access to be able to hop directly into production and take whatever actions they deem necessary. So really don't want that. Want a single place where we can have single users and be able to delete the user from that or disable access, and now they can't get in anywhere else. The next two in the middle there are AWS operations tools and continuous integration, continuous development tools. So this is a location where I would put shared tools, right? Centralized shared tools. You may want to split it into multiple accounts. You may want to have a single account, whatever works best for your organization. If it's different teams who are managing this, possibly different accounts would be better. But what it ultimately rolls down into, centralized shared services should really be in their own accounts to be able to manipulate the other accounts. And then we have our actual application accounts, and these are multi-region, possibly single application per account, single microservice per account, whatever works for your organization, and how you're going to be breaking that up, and how you can minimize the impact to a breach or minimize the impact to the effect of what can happen to a single account, right? And that's going to be, your mileage may vary depending on how you want to set that up. But I would at least have a different account for production, a different account for QA, different account for staging, different account for perf testing, but some different levels of accounts that you're going to be moving software through till it actually lands on production. Production should be its own account, and the other ones maybe different accounts, maybe single accounts, but definitely multiple accounts there. So we've talked about what the multi-account looks like. Now, what are the challenges with dealing with multiple accounts in multiple regions? Well, the tools that AWS builds are really decentralized tools, and they are not designed to automatically share data between regions and between accounts. AWS tries very hard to maintain the boundaries of where those pieces, where the information from any tool or any service or your own tools and services, where that's going to go. We will not move that data. You will have to actually determine if it's right for your applications, for your services, to move that data to different locations. So the tools are not designed to actually do that automatically. So things like config or guard duty or identity and access management, systems manager, CloudWatch, the budgeting tools, those tools really are meant to run in their own account, run in their own space, and then possibly push data back to a central location. Organizations doesn't quite fit that model because the whole purpose of organizations is to create multiple accounts or to create and manage multiple accounts from a hierarchy. So we have a challenge where we have multiple data sources, multiple pieces of information, multiple control points that we want to be able to manage. And we're talking, possibly 10 accounts, possibly 20 accounts, possibly 50 accounts, possibly thousands of accounts, right? If you look to set up your account structure in such a way that you are looking at a true multi-account, you can share resources between them in a prescribed way, you can keep your governance between them in a prescribed way. Creating more accounts isn't really adding more work. It's just adding more records to a software system that's going to be managing the entire thing. So let's actually dive into that a little bit. If we take all that data and centralize it, we can definitely do that with some of the tools we have, but it's not necessarily easy, and it will take some cycles to set it up until now. Introducing Ops Center Explorer, AWS Ops Center Explorer. Ops Center Explorer allows you to visualize and prioritize actionable items. So it's taking items from Ops Center, AWS Ops Center, and being able to look at it in a multi-account, multi-region view, right? So we have a centralized bird's eye view of everything that's going on within our entire organization, within all the accounts that we have, within all the regions that we have, and it's extrapolating the data from there, pulling it back to a single source where you can visualize and take actions on these items. So it's really an aggregated operational view. So essentially report on operational issues across accounts and regions and view data from multiple accounts and multiple services. And now we will actually do a demo of operations of Ops Center Ops Explorer. And to begin the demo, we're actually going to talk about Ops Center for just a moment. So Ops Center is a fairly new tool with AWS that actually creates what we call operational items. So various distribution sources throughout your environments. So let's say patches or CloudWatch events or alarms or config rules or various other data sources. As the state of your accounts change, as the state of your applications change, it can actually fire off rules which will create operational items. The operational items will appear in Ops Center, and there now we have a great place for administrators to hang out and be able to pick up items that are happening across the accounts in near real time. So they can dive into the operational items, dive to where the operational items actually originated from, what rules were triggered to create these, and then be able to perform fixes or maintenance on these various tasks. And operational items are important because Ops Center Explorer actually pulls in a lot of this data from a multi-account, multi-region aggregated view into a single location. So let's actually dive over to Ops Center Explorer. So Ops Center Explorer, this is the entry page and the dashboard page. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is look at the settings. So this is how we would set up Ops Center Ops Explorer. The very first piece would be looking at Ops items rules and determining if we have the proper set of rules that we're pulling in the data from Ops Center into Ops Center Explorer. So we can manipulate which rules we want to see, what kind of severity they're going to have, what kind of category they should end up in as we look at the various rule sets. So the next piece of information inside the settings when we're setting up Ops Explorer is operational data sources. So this is where we can pull the various data sources that's going to show up inside of our Ops Center Explorer. So we can look at it, and right now we have EC2 instances as well as patch manager information being pulled in. So let's go ahead and save that. Next is our data exports. So where we're going to be taking data from all of the sources, and maybe we want to push it to an S3 bucket for further analysis or analytics or machine learning or some other data mining that we may want to do. We can export out to either SNS or S3. We can specify the tag keys for this particular setup. So maybe we want to be able to look at name, business unit, location, bug dash. We can add new tags or remove tags from this location. And then we have a resource data sync. So these are the locations where we're going to be pulling all of the data, so which accounts, which regions, which informational pieces, where we're going to be pulling all that data into Ops Center Explorer. So if we were to click on let's add a data sync, we have a couple of options here. So of course we would name it, so we'd be able to differentiate it from all the other data syncs. And then we have a couple of options. So include only the current account. So maybe I'm running one account, or maybe I just want to see a view of my account and I don't want to see what anyone else is doing. I can also choose to include all accounts from my AWS organization's configuration. So that'll pull in all accounts from the organizations. Or I even have the ability to select organizational units inside the AWS organizations. And you can see as I selected that option, it actually read through my organizations, looked at the different organizational units that I have, engineering, human resources, and finance, and is able to give me a full tree view of where I might want to be able to see data from there. Right? So I can choose one, I can choose multiple, I can choose all of them. However you want to choose and be able to see operational events from those particular environments, from those particular OUs and sub-accounts underneath there. So you would choose which OUs, or we're actually going to leave it at all accounts for my organization configuration. And then you have an option for which regions you want to include. So we can choose either single regions, let's choose Virginia, as well as Ohio, or we can choose all regions. We've also left in a inclusion for all and future regions, right? So this will automatically, as AWS adds new regions, this will automatically add that data source to the synchronization to pull all of the data in from that particular new region. You don't have to go and configure it for any changes. This will automatically take care of that for you. So once you've chosen your regions and which accounts you want to be able to actually grab information from, we would create the resource data sync. I haven't named it here, but we would create the data resource sync, and it will start pulling in information from all of those sources. So we can take a look inside of here, and we can see our resource data sync. These are ones that we already have, right? Test sync, entire organization, and a few others. So let's go back to the dashboard. And you can see here, we have various pieces. So first one is filter. So we can actually filter on those data resource synchronizations that we created. So let's look at entire organization. And it's actually, you can see there's different metrics that pop up for each one of these that we choose. You can see 0, 0, and then in our test sync, OUS, 0, and entire org. We have 72 unresolved, 69 open, and 3 in progress. Right? We can also filter on particular regions, right? Multiple regions or all of them. The first pane here, ops item by status. So we can, so just like the ops items that I mentioned earlier, it's pulling, Ops Explorer is pulling from all of the ops items throughout your entire organization, pulling that into a central location where you can get a great view of unresolved operational items, open operational items, and ones that are actually being actively worked on. And if you were to navigate to any one of these pieces, it's going to show you the list of operational items. Right, and if we look over here, we can actually see, and shoot, I don't have that open. Here we go. It will actually pull open inside that proper account the operational item, and you can actually go and look at it and pull in the information that you want on that the item, how it was created, if there's similar operational items, the operational data about it, as well as the resource that is being affected by that particular operational item. So we can have a full view from here to be able to see a list of all the operational items and dive into more details. So with the entire organization, we can also look at, operational items by severity. So we can categorize the operational items into critical, high, medium, low, and what type of severity we're going to be looking at for those particular ones. And then you can actually dive in and look at the particular operational item that is maybe more severe. So this is a very high level, and you'll be able to break down the operational items and see how they're looking from your entire organization. And you can see here, now we have a summary pane, ops item summary. And we can actually group these by different filters, by different metrics. So we can group them by different accounts. So we can see the operational, whoops, I keep doing that. We can see the operational items for these different accounts. So this account actually has 52 operational items. So maybe as a executive person, I can look at these and say, oh, these accounts have lots of operational items. We need to focus more attention over here. These have less. We don't need as much attention here. We can parse through the data and really get a view of where the items are popping up, where the issues may be hiding, and a great view on how to see them. So we get a nice account view of how many operational items per account. Maybe you want to see it by region. And I only had one region set up, US East, so all of the operational items are in that region. But if we had more regions that we're actually pulling data from, they would show up here in all of the pieces we'd be able to see and be able to filter down through. We can look by tags, right? By the various tags that we set up, that name, business unit, location, and bug dash. So we can filter in multiple different ways and depending on how we set up the data. The next pane is non-compliant instances for patching. So it's actually pulling the information from Systems Manager, Patch Manager across multiple accounts, multiple environments, and looking at your actual compliance status with those patches, right? So if we look over here, we have total non-compliant patches for under 15 days is 0, and critical non-compliant is 0, so that's actually pretty good. But between 15 and 90 days, we actually have quite a few patches that are coming up as non-compliant. So the patches haven't been applied to our various instances. So now we have a great way to hop on and actually take a look at the operational items that were created from these patches not popping up. And if we were to actually go into these, we would see from the managed instances, we would see the managed instance that would take us into Ops Center. We could look at the actual operational item that was showing up from that particular missing patch piece. We could look at the managed instances that would show up under. And from there, we can actually navigate to the particular patches. And again, this is cross-account, cross-region, right? So we have a single location where all of these are popping up, be able to dive in there, be able to dive into the information, and get a high-level view of how many instances are we having that don't have the proper patching level or aren't compliant with our patching level, aren't compliant with our expectations. Where are those instances? How do I track them down? How do I get at that information? And Ops Explorer really ties all of that in so you can have one single location that you can then dive into throughout your multiple accounts, multiple regions, and really get at the data that you need to get at. The next piece, we did open item summary, non-compliant patches, and here we are, ops items over time. So this is actually a trend line of the various types of operational items that are popping up and over what time period we're seeing a rise in them, a fall in them, how we're managing them. Maybe we put new programs in place and we're seeing a rise in Ops Center, operational items. Maybe we put a new program in place, we're seeing a fall in them. So that's a great way to measure metrics of how many items are actually popping up and how many items are trending over time. And with this particular graph, we can actually filter out the various pieces that we don't want to see. So here we can see, from the 15th to the 20th, we had about 60 items. It plateaued at 60, went down to about 10, and then kind of moved on from there. Right. So you have a really good way to be able to understand from the various different categories that we allow you to use what the different operational items are working over time and how to really use that to measure the performance of your operational teams, to measure the performance of fixes that you're putting in, measure the performance of pieces that you're putting in place in order to manage your infrastructure. Next, we have instance count, and this is pretty much similar to the first one, where we're actually looking at operational items count. But this is the instances, the managed instances within the from Systems Manager. So we can filter by ID, we can filter by region, we can also filter by those other tags that we had in place from our resource data sync. So this will actually pop in and show the instance IDs that we're looking to that are managed by Systems Manager across those different accounts. So you can see these. This is the first account that popped up, and here are the instances from the other account. So we can dive in there and understand what instances we have in what account, what's actually being managed and what's not being managed. And that comes over to our manage instances tile here. Where we have actually 14 managed instances and 10 unmanaged instances. So Systems Manager will keep track of what's actually being managed by Systems Manager and what's not being managed. So you have a great quick glance here to be able to say, oh, looks like about half of my fleet is not being managed by Systems Manager, so my machines aren't under compliance. I'm not sure if they're being patched properly. I have very little structural knowledge about what's going on there, right? So this is a great way to track it down and be able to look at why they're not being managed and how to possibly start managing them, right? So we'll look at the managed instances. And if we were to go into any one of these instance IDs, it will actually come up under Systems Manager, Managed Instances, and then be able to dive into that particular instance and see its what management tasks we have running against it, what associations, what patch baselines, things of that nature. If we were to go into unmanaged instances, The instance IDs here will actually take us into the EC2 system, the EC2 console to be able to look at the instances naturally, right? And we can go then look at those instances, determine why they're not being managed. Is there a particular reason? Do I need to install some software? Do I need to lessen the permissions? What reasoning are these instances not actually managed and not under our compliance and governance umbrella? And finally, we have a great view of instance by AMI. So we can look at the various instances we have running across our fleet and what AMIs they are running, right? So we can put in filters here, and you can do some searches and say, okay, these AMIs are no longer valid for our organization to use, but now I can actually track down across account, across region, from our entire organization. We have one bad AMI we don't want to use. We can search in here and determine, here's my AMI. Now I can actually go and locate the instances using that AMI and start terminating them, moving to a new AMI, migrating them, whatever needs to happen for the business. Some of the other nifty features of Ops Explorer: every one of these tiles is customizable, all right? So we can shrink them, we can grow them, we can make them smaller, we can relocate them. Whatever you want to do with your particular tiles and how you want your dashboard to look, we can move these around. Sorry, let me move this down here. So you get full control over this. And if you've made a whole bunch of changes and you don't like it, there is a reset layout. So it'll put it back to the default state. Something to note, if you do make changes inside of this window, these changes will persist. So you close out of the console. When you go back into it, it'll be exactly like you set it up the first time. So quite a bit there that you can do with Ops Center Explorer. And that's it for the demo. So I did want to discuss some other multi-account tips and tricks. So these are various tools that really enable that multi-account experience from a centralized control as well as visualization point. So the first one we're going to talk about is Amazon Event Bridge. So this is a message bus type system that really subscribes to the subscriber-publisher pattern. And allows you to create message event buses from multi-account, multi-region setup. So you push events onto the event bus, onto the event bridge here, and it can actually travel and then land and aggregate into a single account. Or a single account can be reading from multiple event buses that from all other accounts and informational and important events that are happening. We'd subscribe to the event bridge, and then your central account would be able to pull that information and take whatever action is needed, or possibly remediation action or prescriptive action, notify somebody, whatever needs to really happen. After that, we have Systems Manager, and that really allows for a control point at both the operating system level as well as the AWS account level. And Systems Manager, through Systems Manager automation documents, can actually be executed and run against multiple accounts at the same time, as well as multiple regions inside of those multiple accounts at the same time. And you can create automation documents that will actually run at the API level, so you can manipulate the AWS APIs from these control documents, as well as use these control documents in a centralized location to be able to take playbook actions or runbook actions against the various resources in your various accounts. Next, we have AWS CloudFormation. And CloudFormation will allow you to provision resources or other account structures in multiple accounts, multiple regions as well, using stack sets. So you define the template that's going to provision the infrastructure that you want, and provision things in the proper way that you want them through infrastructure as code. And then be able to push it to whatever environments that you want. So maybe you want to have config rules that are similar across all of your accounts. You can define the config rules inside of CloudFormation and then use stack sets to push that to all of your accounts, so you have the same type of setup in all of your accounts. And then finally we come to Amazon S3, Simple Storage Service. And especially with cross-region replication, this allows you to push data where it needs to go from a single source. So you can have a single source sitting in one region and be able to push that to another account even, or a similar account, but push it to another region, push the data to another region in a synchronized fashion, right? So as you're manipulating your core S3 bucket, that data is actually automatically being transferred over to another location, and possibly a singular centralized source location where you can now input and aggregate all that data. So a lot of options to be able to control and visualize how that multi-account, multi-region type setup is going to work. And now as a recap, really start thinking about your multi-account, multi-region strategy as early as possible. The further you go down the single account, the more you put into that single account, that's more to migrate, more to manage. It just becomes a challenge. At the very least, get the security logs off into another account, right? That should be very low risk, very low impact, and really be able to protect those security logs. I highly recommend that. And then once you start managing 2 accounts, multi-accounts, 3, 4, 5, 100,000 becomes much easier. It's just extra software steps, extra steps inside your tooling systems, as opposed to someone going around and managing it by hand. Really look to set up a centralized governance and tooling as a service downstream accounts can really use in a self-service manner. So we don't want the downstream accounts, the people who are actually building the applications, to have to actually interface with the governance groups and have the governance groups actually take action. That will slow down the pace of innovation, that will slow down improvements of the systems, and that team will become a bottleneck. Instead, look to set up these governance tools as something that can be pushed out and that the downstream teams can actually use in whatever manner they need just by setting some tags, making some modifications, opting in, things like that. And then they get the governance naturally. And finally, really look to aggregate your data into a single location for ease of visibility and response. So have all of that into that centralized account, that centralized space where very few people can actually get into, but great place to store the information, great place that's very locked down, great place to view the data, visualize it, run your analytics off of it, and it's all in one single location. So, let's talk. Please come visit us at the AWS Management and Governance booth in the main expo hall at reInvent in the Venetian. And thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful chatting with all of you, and good luck in your multi-account, multi-region journeys. Thank you.